My name is Jay Pratte, and I am currently the zoo director at Miller Park Zoo in Bloomington, Illinois.
Hello, I'm John Rossi. I'm a touring drummer with a passion for animal conservation. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations. Now, I want to share those places with you. I'll be talking to keepers, vets, conservationists, anyone who can help me in my mission of connecting my people to animals through their people. Join me on my Rossifari. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to the Rossifari podcast. Y'all, I'm always so excited when the opportunity comes to bring you an interview from a new facility, and this is that, but it's also so much more. I'm going to be introducing you today to Jay Pratte of Miller Park Zoo, as you heard in the little intro at the beginning there. And Miller Park Zoo is this incredibly small but incredibly awesome zoo that I got to visit last year. And you'll hear kind of about my journey and why Jay and I have taken roughly a year to get this interview to happen. But it all makes sense. And it was, let's just say it was well worth the wait. Jay is an incredible guest. He has some amazing stories. Honestly, we don't get to a lot of the stuff that I want to get to, including like his history and stuff. We kind of just jump around and talk about things. We talk about leadership. We talk about otter training. We talk about the Bear Care Group, which if you don't know what that is, you definitely need to tune in for that. We talk about a lion named Mr. Big. I mean, that's amazing. And just so much more cool, fun stuff. This is absolutely one of those moments where I'm like, oh, hey, look, I have a friend now from doing this experience. And that is very exciting to me. As a matter of fact, after this interview, I think we actually figured out when we're going to get together in person and do another one and have some fun. So no promises, but you're going to love this episode. And hopefully there will be a follow-up in a couple of months that you're going to love just as much or maybe even more. But yeah, quick reminder to make sure that you hit subscribe so you don't miss any of these interview episodes or any of my Zoo News episodes. Make sure that you're following along on all the socials at Rossifari, on TikTok at Rossifari Pod. And if you'd like to support the podcast, you can do so for as little as $3 a month by going to patreon.com/Rossifari. All right, so let's get to it. Here is my interview with Jay Pratte of Miller Park Zoo. I had the pleasure of visiting your zoo when I was out there playing a gig out your way, and we got to meet briefly. So thank you for agreeing to do this and eventually getting around to doing it. I know how crazy things can get. So I have to tell you, I really enjoyed my time visiting your zoo. And I had actually been told by a couple of people there, keepers that I spoke to and stuff, that it was like really a zoo on the rise and that a lot of things have kind of been changing there and growing there a lot. And you actually came up without me mentioning it at all, that I knew of you and that we were going to talk. So before we get into your past, I'd love to hear about just some of what you've been doing at the zoo.
So when this position had opened up and my partner and I decided that this was an opportunity that, he'd support if I applied for. And then when I was the successful candidate, they, let me know, I knew a little bit about the zoo. I'd never visited it. I'm actually quite close with several of the folks up in Lincoln Park in Chicago. So I knew the area. I'm Canadian. I'm born and raised in Southern Alberta. So the Midwest is basically the same thing for me. My partner is from the Midwest. He's actually from Nebraska. So it was an opportunity. And when I interviewed, I really liked the people that I had met, both within the city and that. I was a little wary. I've never been in a leadership role in bureaucratic and in a city position. So there was a little trepidation on my part because that's a lot to learn and some different kind of guidelines. But they had said, we really are trying to bring somebody in who can, ensure we, continue on with our AZA accreditation and address some morale issues that have just developed, like, with the team over time. We really want to improve the culture. That ended up being a bit of an understatement. However,
Oh, no.
as we started kind of diving in, there had been a lot of transition in leadership, not only within the zoo itself, but within the city. And so I think there was an inherent lack, not only of understanding of what the situation was, but there was not really anybody remaining that knew what it could or should be based on current community standards. And so I came in, and of course, the first thing I had to do was get some stuff immediately updated for USDA, get an emergency contingency plan in place, plan for an inspection. And then I also had to immediately start completing all of the very extensive AZA accreditation application paperwork that I started in October. It was all due the beginning of February. And it's, as you've probably seen, anyone can look it up, it's hundreds of pages of documentation and application materials. I had just started. I'm not familiar with the city, the zoo, the budget, protocols. I had to rewrite or write so many different things to make sure we were trying to meet the standards and then plan for an inspection team. And I'll tell you, it has been the single most challenging accomplishment of my career to get through all of that and get to where, then we could invite a reinspection team back. We were granted provisional accreditation last year, because the commission and the inspection team had belief in what I was trying to do and my goals and the vision and all of the information I'd been able to provide. And so this year's inspection team, we just hosted them a couple weeks ago. It was very, very positive. Significant changes were recognized, not only to the facility, to our policies, our protocols, but also to our culture and in our staff. And that's the feedback that really made me really excited. So we've constructed some new habitats. Like last year we opened that. So there are some grounds changes. There's some animal collection changes. We've had a bit of turnover. So we've had some staff changes, but overall, we just every day, we keep growing, we keep learning, we keep changing. We try to see what we can do more or better of. And that's kind of my overall philosophy. And that's where we're headed. And I'm kind of glad even that it was last year that was evident to my staff.
Yeah, it was.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it was. And it was really cool to hear that and to hear that things were changing, although I hadn't heard any of the bad stuff. But just like when you hear things are changing for the better, I don't care if you're the best facility in the world, if you're getting better, that's great, Yep. It was actually interesting when I was there, you were in the AZA accreditation, like the team
Yes.
was there. I actually got to watch them walk around and like ask staff questions and stuff a little bit just as I was looking at animals. It was fun. And you did not seem stressed at all about it. I'm sure you were, but like when you came out to chat with me for a bit, I could tell that you did not want to leave them hanging, but you did seem very calm and confident, which good job pretending, I guess.
Well, and honestly, it's at that point, it's not pretense. I kind of equate it. It's the same thing. If I'm going to do public speaking somewhere, we just hosted a bear care conference in Oakland. And of course I had like 4 or 5 presentations. I was moderating, speaker panels. I equate it to, I'm going on a trip somewhere. I've got to go fly across the country. I can do all the planning and all the packing and everything I want, and I can stress out about it. But at the point where I'm sitting there in the airport lounge waiting to board my flight, I can't change anything at that point. So if I'm waiting for my flight, the AZA team is here on grounds, there is a point in there where I recognize it is what it is. And I'm going to go with it. And, I try to, what you got to see was actually me on a very normal, kind of just approach and day, welcoming people into our zoo and really participating in a process that I believe in. So that's kind of pretty standard. I think if I had showed up like, all harried, bags under my eyes, wearing last week's, I don't think that really would have helped our case very much either. But
fair point. But I did find it funny when we reconnected this year to finally do the interview, though, because I did think it was interesting. I was like, yeah, I was there for the AZA accreditation, and then you reach out and you're like, hey, can't do it right now because we have AZA
Surprise!
accreditation. And I was like, okay, I guess they got provisional. And I was like, I didn't, I was like, with these interviews, we'll see how things go. But I love that you're being like just super transparent about it. You're like, yeah, I came here, we got provisional, they liked it, and now we had a much better, inspection this time, and everything was really positive. That's really cool. I really value transparency in all of this process. Everything to do with this. I mean, obviously I do. I couldn't have this podcast otherwise. But that's really cool. And it's nice to hear that they seemed really excited about the changes that you've been making.
I appreciate hearing that. I do try to be, I think maybe sometimes ruthlessly transparent. I believe in honesty. Like, obviously, we all know in our roles, there's some information you can't always share. But it was interesting because one of the first animal losses we had once I had taken over, we put out on social media and I did a press release. Well, immediately there was a FOIA for information. And I actually took it quite personally because I've never had this happen before. And everybody, the city was very supportive and the marketing folks were like, do not take this personally. This is not a reflection of you. Historically, that transparency has not existed. And when people have asked questions, they've not been able to access information. So me being able to, in everything we do, in our policies and procedures, working with USDA and AZA, with our local media, that transparency has, I think, worked in our favor to gather community support. The Miller Park Zoological Society board is fully behind us. I have great support from the city all the way up to management from the city manager and the council. And I think that's been an integral part of it. I mean, I try to ensure that we're honest and transparent. And if something happens, good, bad, otherwise, it's in there why this happened, what we can do better, and what resources I need to get us there. And I think that approach has been appreciated not only by our team internally, based on your feedback, but from the city. And even most recently, the recent accreditation team was really favorable. They also will list achievements as well as concerns, and they listed several achievements about culture, leadership, the improvements here. And that's a signal for me from an organization we're part of that I respect, along with the city, the society, and my staff, that tell me I'm probably on the right course.
That's awesome. I really respect that. Very cool. And, I'm curious about your history a little bit, but before we completely dive into that, I'm specifically curious about, it's funny, as we're sitting here and talking about the changes you've made, we keep talking about what is frankly my least favorite animal, humans, although they are important. But, everything you're talking about is culture and changing that. And that's all great and obviously hugely important. I respect the heck out of it. But I'm curious what it was about you or your background or whatever that made you the right person to help change that culture. As opposed to starting off by talking about just animals constantly. So
it was a very kind of straightforward job description. When I was here, I started off I was born and raised in a little tiny town in southern Alberta, Fort Macleod. We were nowhere near a zoo. The closest zoo was a Calgary Zoo, and I think we went there once, and I was so young I didn't remember it.
Fair.
And I grew up and I loved animals. I did. I don't know why. It's that whole biophilia thing. Like, I was born with a love for animals and nature I can't account for. And I always loved the big cats or tigers. On my bedroom wall, there was a giant poster of a tiger. I can still remember it to this day. On the other wall was a giant poster of Linda Carter as Wonder Woman. Do with that as you will. But, I always gravitated towards science. I watched National Geographic. The movies I loved had animals in them. And I just always wanted to learn more. But you either had to be a veterinarian or a farmer. And I learned very quickly with one shadowing day, I did not want to be a veterinarian. And then farming and working with animals in agriculture wasn't of interest to me. So I started getting and working on my degree. I thought I would go into environmental law. I was one of the smartest kids Fort Macleod ever put out, so I could head for whatever path I want. I figured for my family, they're going to want me to be a doctor, a lawyer. Maybe environmental law will keep me near animals. I had no clue. And so when I fell into zookeeping, I literally did. A friend called and said, "Hey, there's this place that has all these big cats outside of, the city. You should go check it out." I started volunteering. Within a month, I was working there. Within another month, I was helping run the place. I changed all my degrees, both my bachelor's and my master's, and I never looked back. And so every time I've made a step in my career, it was taking care of my favorite animals. And then it was, how can I do more and help other staff and join the AAZK, the American Association of Zookeepers community? Well, now I can talk about what I've done with a group and I can grow that bubble. And my career, whenever I've made a change, it's because I've wanted to do more. I've hit this point where I have information and skills, and I wanted to be able to affect more animals, more people. And that's kind of where I was sort of climbing up. And the last couple of years, the recruiters started coming after me. And that was a signal to me that said, I may need to take the next step. And I focused pretty much solely on AZA accredited zoos, although there were some international facilities that reached out to me for interviews. But I'm very also protective of my quality of life for my family. It's myself, my partner, several rescue animals. So we have a house, we have our yard, we have a quality of life that we really enjoy. And so when I was looking for opportunities, there were going to be ones that I thought not only could I fit in and do the job properly and well, but it was in an area where we wouldn't have to sacrifice or diminish those things that, we love for our home and our lives. And when Miller Park Zoo came up as an opportunity, I immediately applied, just based on some of the variables we talked about. And their interview process, they were very engaging, right from the HR folks at the top that were like, they seemed responsive to my style. And when I say that, I love interviewing for this kind of thing and for jobs. As an introverted person who can be extroverted, it seems odd, but job interviews, I always take something away. I always learn. I always think they're so much fun and so amazing. So I go in and there's always a measure of, again, my transparency in there. Here's the history of what I've done. I always work in that I have worked with groups like OSHA, HSUS, PETA Foundation, because that's where I've also been able to make a difference outside of the AZA community to animals, to legislature. And then I also just, mention partway in through there, like, my partner is a driver for UPS. He loves the Midwest. Would only be a little statement, but they're going to know the person that I was and the person that I am. And it was a very engaging interview. The two folks from Park and Rec Department that I was able to spend the time with, one of them is still the current director of Parks and Rec. It came down to, they said they were looking for a gunslinger, somebody that could create and implement change to move the zoo and the team forward and to grow it. And I remember when I received the call and they offered me the position, it wasn't like you were the successful candidate. They told me you were the candidate for this position. And we moved forward from there. So that to me spoke of value, not just of, oh, hey, this guy's had 30 years in the zoo field, but they saw the personality and they felt that was going to be something that was also going to be of benefit, not just to the zoo, but as a city leader as well. And so that value, even through tough times and some struggles, remains with me and reminds me, why I do what I do.
That's really cool. And one thing that I'm finding interesting and almost to the point of shocking with everything that you're saying is that whenever I talk to people from city zoos or government zoos of any type, it's at best neutral and at worst combative in terms of the feeling of, heck, half the time, just the red tape to get an interview with somebody from a city zoo. Like I always like to point out that there's one that I've had on like once a year since I started. And the reason that they're on once a year is because it takes about a year to get the process through the government. It literally does. Like we will do an interview and we will wrap it up and we will say, all right, so maybe next time we'll talk about this because we have this new thing coming, whatever. And then they start the red tape and then 10 months later we get the approval and then it takes some time to schedule and me to get there. And so it takes right around a year each time. And they're so apologetic and they hate it so much. And you seem to really have embraced that, which is cool.
So embraced and adapted are two different things. I can tell you that overall, my general personality does not lend itself to bureaucracy. However, with guidance and assistance from like leadership and that, I've been able to help understand very quickly, what the parameters are and what they need. I am actually still able to be who I am and what they need. And they've been able to respect the changes that I've made. And as we've navigated and identified, work through our budget, we're going to develop our master plan, facility needs. They have been supportive because I can't speak highly enough of this city. I cannot tell you why, but somewhere along the line, city leaders have accepted that AZA standards are what we need to meet. And so they value when I present them information that says this is what we have to do. They've been involved when the inspection teams have been here, and they have been all in, which that's something then that has made things easy for me because I don't have to convince them of the importance of that. I can just work on reaching those goals. And I think that there's still bureaucracy, there's still steps, there's still red tape. I'm now going to have to learn all the systems for procurement and purchase orders and all kinds of different things, which are not my background and skill set. I have never been a business manager. I have been trained for leadership and for animal care and welfare for so many years, but I'm going to learn these skills. And they've seen, as I've tried really hard to learn and pick up on them, that I'm working to fit in and figure out how to reposition the zoo as a city department in Parks and Recreation to increase its value to the community, to the city, and to really make sure that they know that the more resources that they put in here, the more they're getting out of us. And we keep putting our money where our mouth is with that. And so I'm going to try to keep that trend moving forward as well. Nice.
Very cool. And I love the ability to adapt. That was good. That was a very fair, but very real answer. I appreciate that though.
But you know what's funny? And I mean, you've talked to some of the staff here. It was surprising for me. You come to I think if we're not the tiniest AZA accredited zoo at around 4 acres or whatever else, we're like the second smallest. I think we might be the smallest. In the middle of the Midwest, like nobody knows where Bloomington is. You Google Bloomington, it automatically puts you to Bloomington, Indiana.
Yes.
So you have to be really careful if you're booking flights or tickets for anything. When I got here, so much of the staff, there's a junior zookeeper program here that's been going for 50-something years. These kids have come up through this program. They've been volunteers. They've worked here for summers. Like, so many of the staff here have been to other places and then come back.
Wow.
Because I can't tell you why, but something about Miller Park Zoo generates this dedication, love, and commitment in so many staff members and these kids that come in and join the programs and in the community. I've honestly never seen anything like it. And it is really amazing. And it has allowed me to really allow some of these team members and, these individuals to flourish because I don't have to convince them why they want to be here. They already want to be here. They want to be able to do more and do better all the time. But there's this passion for this little teeny zoo in the little middle of nowhere in central Illinois that I have rarely seen. People have passion for the career and their animals and what they do. It's not even just that. It's for this place. And it's really admirable, and it's something that motivates me to continue to try to do the best I can for the team, even when things are a little tough sometimes.
That is cool. And yeah, you do. You have an amazing team there. Oftentimes I try and be a just like very much fly on the wall, just kind of chilling in the background. But that was not my experience at your zoo for whatever reason. I think I was feeling a little chatty that day. Sometimes it gets a little lonely when you're out on the road. And I think I was pretty excited about seeing the AZA people walking around. I thought it was cool to get to actually witness some of that and watch them talking to people. But also you just have a very approachable team. And there was one story that I wanted to share in particular about my experience there. Y'all had this little outdoor amphitheater is yep. A very grandiose word for a very small stage area, but a nice yep. little thing. And there was a sign up saying there was going to be an animal ambassador, meeting type thing there. Yep. I forget the exact phrasing, at let's say 2:30. I don't remember, but, and myself and 2 other families were sitting there waiting, and 2:30 hit and nothing, and 2:35 hit and nothing. And I know how the animal world works. Yep. Somebody doesn't want to crate and suddenly you get a show 15 minutes later or a meet and greet 15 minutes later, whatever, that's fine. And by 2:40, 2:45, I was like, all right, something's up. And there were some kids there and they were getting restless. And I was like, I'm just going to duck in the Herp building over here and see what, see if I can find someone, see what's going on. And it turned out that because of the heat that day, they had decided to move the encounter indoors, and somebody just forgot to grab the sign that these things happen, right?
Yeah.
And I went out and I spoke to just a very, young keeper, dude could not have been more than 14. No, I'm kidding. But, there's some
But it
people
was probably a junior zookeeper.
that would actually make sense, and of course I was very nice about it, but I was just like, hey, there's a sign out saying there's going to be, an ambassador. And he goes, oh, we did that inside. And I was like, oh, okay, you have like, I don't know, 7, 8 people, not a lot, but who were waiting for that. And he goes, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Hold on. And he grabbed 2 other people and he ran outside like 30 seconds later, and they brought the kids in and the adults and me, everybody. And they pulled out a couple of the animals right there and did an impromptu meet and greet for those people. And I was like, I have been to so many facilities and seen so many things like this happen. And even at some really great facilities, they're not going to go that extra step. There will be apologies. There will be explanations. There will be whatever. But there we were, like, just, meeting some stuff in the Hurt building, and the keepers were super into it, and everyone was super nice, and the kids were losing their minds because now it went from a thing on a stage to their own personal experience. And I was like, this is very, very cool. Also, your gift shop team would not let me leave without giving me recommendations for coffee, shopping, best restaurants. And they did not know, oh, John from Rossifari. Yep. I just happened, they we were chatting, I think just about some of the merch, and they were like, oh, are you not from here? And when I said that, forget it. And the rest of my night was planned by the gift shop team, and I listened to them, and I had some of the best coffee that I've ever had. And I mean, it was such a great, personable place, and all of that really, really stood out to me.
Well, I'm glad for hearing that. Like, we do. Customer service is important, and I remind all my team, educators, zookeepers, even our utility staff, that nobody's going to know if you're walking around and there's a logo on your shirt, you're a zookeeper, or you're representing the zoo. So we're always going to be positive. That we actually work it into interview questions. How would you handle this question if it wasn't your area? But those JZKs, we have the junior zookeeper program has multiple levels. Like, they start off when they're like 12 or 13, and it goes right through high school, that as they work their way through the program, they can become animal handlers. Then they can become educators. Then at the very top, the master junior zookeepers, they actually have the ability to oversee the other junior zookeepers. And during the summer, there's like 500 of these kids running around. They've all got different colored shirts depending on what level they are. But I get ambushed sometimes. Like, they are so excited about what they do. And if I don't have, even when I've been wearing like a logoed polo or something like that, some of these kids don't recognize me, and they're like trying to suck me in, and they're like, hey, did you want to come and learn about this hedgehog? And I'm staring at them like, I know everything about that. But I'm like, yeah, I absolutely do. And these kids are so earnest and so excited. And I can tell you, I would never have been that kid. I'd have been off reading about those animals. But these kids, it's like you are going to buy this used car, whether you want to or not. Like, I mean, they are going to make you love this animal and this zoo. And they're so earnest and cute about it that it's really something to see. And the amount, you've been around this, the amount of planning and coordination for signing out animals, the training involved, recording. This year we improved communication between like all the kids and the paid zookeepers and stuff, with new little handheld radio units, because everybody can't have like a full-on city radio. So we're really always working to provide such a great experience for them, but then the community. And I will tell you, I have posted positions for everything from seasonal, educators and guest services staff, right up to full-time zookeepers, and at least a half a dozen applications every time, at least. Have somewhere in there, I was in the junior zookeeper program for this many years. It is, and again, we circle back to that love for this place. That is just amazing.
Wow, that's really cool to hear. I always love seeing those kinds of things, but yeah,
well, usually it's not me that's just being dragged in by these guys.
No, they were very happy. One of the things that I like to do when I go to zoos, honestly, is I pop in my noise canceling headphones, just because guests can be a lot, and you only can hear so many people looking at red pandas and calling them raccoons before you either put in noise canceling headphones or leave crying. And I like to have like a very like me time at zoos, but your facility didn't really allow for that, but like in a good way, and I really appreciated that.
Because of the size of the zoo, and we were right in the middle of the park, and there's a roadway close by, Whenever I've worked at a zoo before, it's always been a larger zoo, and there's a hiding place. Like there's a bench somewhere that no one else knows about, where I could go sit down with my lunch and whatever else. Here, my favorite place, there's a bench under the tree right outside our admin building, right by the flamingos. It's not quiet. It's not calm. There's children screaming. There's people going by, but I at least try to get some zen out of that, ignoring what the tortoises are doing behind me with the little squeaking noises. And it's less quiet and zen than one would hope for, but it is what I have here, and I value it when I have that, 15 minutes to shovel in my lunch.
That's amazing. Oh, very cool. So yeah, you mentioned tortoises and flamingos and I mentioned red pandas. So I think we need to chat about at least some of the animals that you have at the zoo. And what my listeners tend to really like is, rather than like an overview of species, like we could start there, but like tell me about a couple of the cooler individual animals or like things that people really like at the zoo.
We of course have the favorites. When you come here, everybody loves, Rojo. He's our 17-year-old, Sumatran tiger. He's a favorite. Our snow leopards here, everybody loves these snow leopards. There's been a history of our snow leopards here. Right now, we only have our male Sage, who was born here, but he is one that actively hunts down small rabbits when it's the season. But like when I go out there, he will stalk me and I can run back and forth, and he's very engaging with people. The anteaters and otters, of course, like people love them. We do every day, twice a day, like the otter training and feeding, and it is packed along that pathway. People just love to watch those otters interact with team members, engaging and just being otters. Yes. I mean, you know what it's like. Yeah. But I think, the flamingos resonate with everyone. Everybody walks in. It's the first thing you see. There's that little flock right there. Kids love them. It resonates with people so much, that flamingo pool and those birds, especially you get a beautiful day, the sun's shining, there's shade. I think those are a big one. But our favorite animal, if I had to say, across this whole zoo is our cockatoo. We have an animal ambassador named Henry. He's been here for many years. During the summer, he's got his own enclosure out in our Wallaby Walkabout where he talks to and freaks out with and entertains staff all day. He is a regular education ambassador. We have zoo board members and donors that love this bird. They contributed to a new enclosure for his indoor housing this winter and stuff, to help us out. He's on the side of a bus here in the city with our zoo education manager. Julia and Henry have their own bus. Like, that's how much this bird is loved. And so if I had to put this place's personality into one of our favorite, little family members, it would be Henry the cockatoo.
That's amazing. I love hearing what animals take off at places, and that sounds like an incredible bird. You mentioned the otter training demonstrations, and I actually got to see one of those when I was there, and I thought it was very engaging, very well done. You were right. People absolutely lost their minds over it. And you had an interpreter out there talking about things and the keeper doing the training thing. But can you talk a little bit about what that is like for people that are listening and kind of what makes it unique? Because I've not really seen that in depth of an otter training anywhere that I've been where it's presented that way. And I thought it really was cool.
So what you see, so for a little bit of history, I'm sure most of your listeners know, but operant conditioning, positive reinforcement, reward-based training is our primary premise here for how we want to be able to manage all of the animals in our collection. That's actually my personal background. I started off I just evolved after I had my bachelor's. My minor was in operant learning, and it was one of those things I just did. I hate the term whisperer because I think, it turns into magic or sorcery. The attention to detail and the ability to learn how to navigate and respond to cues that the animals are giving us. And then operant conditioning, operant learning is helping the animals understand what we want of them so they can participate in their own care. For otters, I've trained several otters over the years myself, and with these programs, you really want them to be able to do some basic things. Why don't you go stand over there on that scale or on that rock? Now, because while you're doing that, you can't also be over here interfering or stealing food from the other one, or you can't be trying to get out the door we're trying to open. It's an incompatible behavior, but you're going to be rewarded for it. And then we'll often use a target with most species or animals. It can be a stick, a ball and a stick, a buoy, and you teach them to touch body parts to it. But by doing that, people can watch in our otter demonstrations. It is the single most basic behavior. Touch your nose to this, you will get a reward. But suddenly they can go somewhere to touch their nose to it. They can stand up, which the otter stands up and everybody's like, oh my God, the otter's standing. It's so cute. And you nod and smile. But we can then use those to teach more advanced behaviors. We can teach them to shift into a smaller like cube or shift area where we can now get them used to us with a barrier safely inspecting them for medical or health issues. We can weigh them regularly. We can get them to shift into a crate. So if they need to be transported somewhere for care or relocated, for facility maintenance or work, up to advanced where we've trained, I've trained otters for voluntary injections, open mouth behavior so we can see dental exams, administering eye drops and other types of medications. Well, we don't show those complex behaviors when they're in their habitat. People really get the gist of not only what can we teach these animals, but the most important part of that is the essence of zookeeping. And I know you know this, and generally, aside from a few places, the zookeeping career is not one you join for financial gain or benefit over your life. You do it because you have a passion and a love. And how that hard work and dedication ends up being reciprocated is our animals. When you know you're making a difference in their life. And I summed it up. I actually did a presentation at our Bear Care conference this year, and it was called Trust. And rather than teach them, here's how you train in that, like these people have heard this from me for years, I spoke specifically about the importance of relationship building, how to build and maintain trust through varying kind of things. And when you see those keepers out there training the otters, like out in the habitat, it is very clear that those otters trust the team members. Even if they don't get it right all the time, sometimes they miss a cue or the reward comes late, they're right back there participating because they trust that they have their best interests in mind and they want to be part of that. And it's some animals, it's subtle. You'll never see that level of, effusiveness from a snow leopard or a Galapagos tortoise, but it still exists. The operant learning gives us the opportunity to teach them to participate in, and that this is going to have a reward for you. And then that's what helps us build that trust. And those little otters, Henry, these are the best examples we've got because they're under human care for their entire lives. These animals aren't ever going to be released. So it's our obligation to provide them the best care we can and make sure we're part of their lives now. I mean, they're still otters, but we're part of their lives. And so we need to make that as positive and reinforcing as possible. And the trust that we develop with those animals lets us go out and in front of a bunch of strangers and screaming children and God knows what weather and whatever else, they're still going to come and they're going to participate in their training demonstration for their fish and be happy to do so because we've been building those relationships with our animals. So no different than what I tell people all the time to do with their dogs at home and whatever else. It's build that trust. Think about where you want to go with that and, working our way up. And that's our whole philosophy for our animal care interactions across our entire facility.
That's awesome. And, one thing that I think I always love, training is such a huge thing for me. And I've had Steve Martin and Wouter Stillard and Hillary Hankey and I'm obsessed with training. It's so cool. And I've applied what I learned to my relationship with my son, who will be turning 10 soon.
Right.
And we have the best relationship. And he trusts me so much. And anytime he does anything, he's a good kid, but anytime he does anything where my reaction, my instinct is to be like, gotta squash this, I never do it. We're gonna talk and we're gonna do positive reinforcement and we're gonna, I'm fortunate that with a human, you can actually use, words rather than, it makes it a little easier. But outside of that, I've always approached it from what I've learned from the amazing trainers that I've talked to and stuff. And it really makes a difference. And I can tell and I can see it compared to even his relationship with just other parental figures and grandparents and stuff in his life and everything, he is completely open and honest with me about things, and we have a lot of trust, and it really helps.
Well, and the key is all of learning, all of operant learning, and it's not just animals. This is everybody. Every living thing learns. And operant learning is just you learn from the consequences. And if it's positive consequences, you're going to do the behavior again. If it's negative consequences, you're not going to. But the key in there is with animals, with your children, with your spouse, they have to know what the desired behavior is. If they're just always getting aversive responses for what they do, but they don't know what to do to get the reward, then they end up confused. And so it's providing the guidance and trying to teach them this is what we're hoping for, or using your words if you're a human adult, and then reinforcing with thank yous, with praise, with recognizing, and then remembering. We're not always going to get it right every single time. You're allowed to fail, you learn from it, but then always just trying to keep, as long as it is reinforcing to the other individual, animal or person, they're going to trust you more. They're going to look at you. They're going to be glad when you walk in the room. They're going to be happy that you've shown up there. It's not going to be like, oh, here we go, or whatever else. When you think about the most difficult relationships, I've watched it with people, I've watched it with animals. People fall back, the old habit, nagging, or, whatever else. These are aversive responses to people, that no one wants. And animals that have not received maybe this type of trusting care or this reinforcing approach using super old school methods, like that, was back in the history of animal care, you can see that it's affected how they trust their caregivers overall. And you can fix it. My favorite animal was a lion. His name was Mr. Big. And I was working with him, and he was an older lion. And he was one of those ones, if you pissed him off, he was going to escalate. Like, it wasn't like, I'm going to walk away and I'm going to ignore you. That's a very big cat thing to do. He was 100% going to bring the fight to you and escalate. So then you had aggression. And there was no trust there. And I worked with him for several years. And all it was building trust. And it went from this animal that, couldn't shift. The sight of caregivers or vets or anybody would set him off or whatever else to he always still had attitude. He would complain forever about what I was asking him to do, but he was happy to take the rewards and he always complied. And when I showed up, he always knew that situation was going to be positive. And over the course of years, we took this animal with a history of fear and aversion and aggression towards care staff, and he participated in every stage of voluntary care you could hope to do with a full-grown male lion through barriers. We put special little doors in. I got him to where he would allow us to bring his tail out. We could monitor blood pressure, do voluntary blood draws, to where I could hand, with veterinary oversight and permission, for anesthesia if we had to do testing on him or if he had to have some sort of dental work. I could do it by hand through a barrier. There was no dart guns. There was no risk of harm. And it reduced the amount of the pharmaceuticals we needed for that immobilization. He was calm, and he would be out in less than 5 minutes right where we were, and I would stay with him. And because it was so calm and he was trained for it, when he woke up, he wasn't mad at me again either. Wow. He didn't remember something terrible. And that's a journey. Like, I have pictures of him and whatever else everywhere, in my home, in my office, whatever else. And, well, listeners can't see. You can. Oh, he's right here.
He's gorgeous.
And he is 100% what we can do when we think about the animal or the other individual's experience and how we can affect that. And I fail. I have rough days. I go home and I'm so tired on my temper, I miss an opportunity to reinforce. Or like you said, you get that, and then they become sensitive to it because they're like, oh, and I have to try to do the same thing for my partner and recognize when he's not trying to pick a fight or piss me off. I've had a long day. I'm responsive. Let me figure out what to do about this. And I'm not always perfect, but I always want to try and grow and do better. And it does. It changes who you are. It changes the people around you and how they regard you. And animals are exactly the same way. Whether it's your dog, it's an otter, it's Henry, it's Mr. Big the lion. And that, for me personally, it was animals forever. That's why I was a great keeper. I was the tiger trainer. Then I was the giant panda trainer. And then it was everything. It was octopus, crows. I learned, oh my God, I love training everything. And I've taught it around the world through AAZK, through the Bear Care Group. And now I've hit that like weird, like servant leader kind of, zoo leader approach where I get excited when my staff gets excited that they've reached their goals. And I can also see them responding as individuals to this same methodology. So that's what becomes reinforcing to me. And like you said, knowing that that animal loves you and knowing that they respond to you in a way that, shows you're providing awesome care. I take that from people the same way. And that's what keeps me going on any given day.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that so much. So we are winding down time-wise here. And I can already tell you, sir, that we're going to need to do a second interview at some point because I literally feel like I've barely scratched the surface with you. And I want to have you on again. So we'll figure that out down the road. Absolutely. But there was one thing that I did need to ask you about before we get to our final questions, which involves your shirt right now. And you've mentioned your group a couple of times here. So can you explain to me what that organization is?
So I am currently founder, one of the remaining founders and president. It's called the Bear Care Group. It can be found online at bearcaregroup.org. It is a nonprofit that we started 15, 16 years ago. It was originally myself and Elsa Poulsen. If you look up Elsa Poulsen, she is no longer with us. We lost her to breast cancer several years ago. But we started the Bear Care Group to be a nonpartisan resource group that was developed to help bear caregivers anywhere around the world. It doesn't matter where you were from. You could be rescuing them in India. You could be working in an accredited or a non-accredited facility here in the United States, Canada, around the world. You could be taking care of bears in a circus. If your goal was to take better care of your bears, we were there for you. And it grew in scope. We always have maintained our website. We've got our social media presence. Our board has obviously evolved over the years. Elsa did write 2 books before she passed. One is called, her first one was Smiling Bears, which talks kind of a bit about what we did. And my favorite one and the most moving one, and I use a lot of times, because it tells a story like what I did about Mr. Big in ways that anyone that loves animals, you can't put it down. It's called Bearla's Story, Barle. You can find it on Amazon, and it talks about when Elsa was involved in rescuing one of these Suarez circus polar bears when it came to the Detroit Zoo, and all about that whole process, her building trust, and how this little bear that came from a less than optimal environment grew to become a full polar bear, thrive, reproduce. And it's very Elsa in its essence, and her dedication to bears really had her recognized as a hero for bears everywhere around the world. And when we lost her, I took over as president, and we've still maintained that. We offer every year, COVID, we switched to online opportunities, conferences, and workshops. We will generally host international conferences. We did just a couple months ago. We hosted in supported by Fish and Wildlife and the Oakland Zoo in Oakland, California. It was a great conference with delegates from all over the world. And then we'll offset those with workshops where we target and we go to locations like when we went to India and paired with Wildlife SOS. We went to Vietnam and paired with Animals Asia, where there are situations, for example, bear bile farms. In India, it was the dancing bear problem, where these people are taking in bears in situations that are less than optimal, and we're there to help their caregivers that maybe don't have like the education resources or background that we might have here in North America or in Europe, and we're going to take and we're going to present those to them. And we're generally well supported, but we're able to reach not only the managers, go to those facilities and do some stuff with them, but we're able to provide some of those keepers who are there trying to take care of and learn. And sometimes it's financial, but it's always resources and examples and demonstrations. And that's how we and our little group have had this impact on the, been able to impact the world. One bear at a time is kind of what we say.
Right.
And that's Elsa Poulsen's legacy that we all support. but we've, like what I've done here, we continue to grow and evolve based on, how social media evolves, what people need. And so we don't produce the same information and resources every time. Every year, every conference and workshop, I do a variation of training because that's my background. And this year I turned it into trust and relationship building because they didn't need to hear from me one more time. Here are the basics of operant conditioning. Here's how you can train. So we're always going to grow to meet the needs of people and bears everywhere as well. And that includes working with the AZA Bear Tag, working with, we've worked with OSHA before, we have worked with USDA scent officials, and this year we were lucky to have Fish and Wildlife folks from different states, several different states, come present, participate, speak in panels. So it's really an engaging experience, and we're always happy to, to be able to do that and to continue that on. So I'm very proud of what we've been able to do. I love my board and my team, and we have such a dedicated membership and group of delegates and people. There's some of the same ones that come every year. We have some folks that they travel from around the world, France or whatever else, and they're going to come to every conference and every workshop, no matter what. And then there's those that are there for the first time that are so excited to hear about how we're working to improve these, these policies, these resources, and get them these things out there to help them out to be better bear keepers. And you and I know it applies to everything else, otters, birds, or whatever else. And yeah, that's what we do. Thank you. I appreciate you asking.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really cool. It's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show. But there's one tale left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story.
When I saw that in the email, I was like, oh my goodness. I'm not one that's ever been freaked out or weirded out, but I immediately got triggered and flashback. I was baby zookeeper many years ago, was at a city facility up in Canada, and I was on a tear. I was on a cleaning tear. And there was this hallway. It was a people hallway. We walked in, brick and whatever else, and there was an animal. It was a primate shift chute. It was up above me, and they would go from their inside holding, and they could go to outside holding, back and forth through this chute. And I looked at it, and I was like, I wonder when the last time that was cleaned was. So I went and got myself a ladder because it was a solid bottom with mesh sides, and the rock was rusted shut, the lock. And I'm like, okay, rusted shut to the point I had to cut it off.
Oh my.
So now I've got this lock off, animals are secured out, and now the thing's rusted shut. So I'm levering this hasp, I'm down there, and finally I'm popping it open with a crowbar, and I don't even want to guess how many years of leftover food, monkey feces, cockroaches, dead cockroaches, cockroach feces rained down, filled that section of the hallway, my shirt, everything. And the best part was, it was one of those, it was like something out of a sitcom. Like I just froze. And at that exact moment, one of the supervisors opened up the door to the hallway, saw me standing there, appalled and horrified. They just looked at me, nodded, and turned around and left and locked the door behind them. And I just immediately freaked out, shed everything, went and had a quick shower, got into a clean set of clothes and whatever else, and then just got everything cleaned up and whatever else, oiled all the hinges, set it back to rights. And then that got added to a regular routine cleaning schedule because I can tell you I was not prepared for everything that was going to rain down from the sky on my poor little zookeeper butt that day. So there amazing. You have it.
That's amazing. Oh, my God. Woo, all right. Well, thank you so much for that and for all this time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I look forward to when we can, talk again. I'm happy to schedule sometimes because if all goes well, which we'll find out in September at the AZA conference and when I have my commission hearing, we got 4 more years before you'll have to worry about, tripping over and competing with an AZA inspection here at the Miller Park Zoo.
So much fun, such cool information. One of the things that stood out to me about that one was the fact that the Bear Care group exists, whether accreditation exists or not. So I just thought that was really cool. I think sometimes places like the AZA can become very insular, even though, I love it and support it and am a part of it and all the things. But I don't know. It stood out to me when Jay said that like, yes, this is a resource for anyone who cares for bears and wants to better care for bears. I thought that was very cool. So yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed that one as much as I did. I did want to take a moment here to thank my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Shank, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, and Jenny Owens. And hey, don't forget to be back here on Friday for Rossifari Zoo News. And until then, remember, friends, the word credits backwards is Steiderk. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.